The big centers on the market will be holding court, taking meetings. Are the Lakers going to be part of it? Can they get their men? We'll tell you next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for stopping by. Locked On Lakers, Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Plenty to unpack in today's episode as free agency opens up Tuesday afternoon, 3 p.m. on the West Coast, 6 o'clock if you happen to live back east. So, like I said yesterday, feel free to take the afternoon off of work. You're going to be distracted anyway. Good time to take that half day of PTO you've been holding on to. We'll get to some very interesting news about LeBron and Anthony Davis perhaps reuniting in San Francisco to play with the Warriors. Obviously something that would have an impact on the Lakers. But let's start, Andy, with the high-profile centers. Both Jalen Duren and Walker Kessler are reportedly going to take meetings with suitors as they try to drive up their price in restricted free agency.
Or potentially actually find new destinations. I would not.
But either way, but at a higher price, like driving up their price, whether they go to a new team or an old team. You got to remember, because they have to be able to be priced out of the market that they're currently in. The real wrinkle here, I think, that will surprise people is that Jalen Duren reportedly wants to go to Sacramento, of all places.
I mean, that's how you really let Detroit know if you're Jalen Duren. I don't want to be back here anymore. These negotiations have pissed me off. When you start signaling not just a willingness to go to the Kings, but a desire, like nobody actually wants to go to the Kings unless they have other options. And by other options, I mean damn near any other.
People get elected. People who get elected to office in California don't want to go to Sacramento. That's where the work is. But like Jalen Duren apparently wants to go there, and at the very least, there is some talk that a reasonable sign and trade offer could be made that would satisfy the Pistons as well as the Kings, which will get to a problem for the Lakers here with both Kessler and Duren for that matter. But it is fascinating how this is sort of playing out.
Well, one of the things that I think is really interesting about this thus far, and while you are correct that to some degree all of this is public negotiations and theater and trying to create leverage, it does appear that there is a difference in animosity, maybe too strong of a word, but degrees of disenchantment between Jalen Duren and the Pistons and Walker Kessler and the Jazz. Like there had been that report a couple weeks ago, I guess it was, that Walker Kessler was unhappy his situation with Utah, and that Tim McMahon from ESPN reported that the Jazz came out of the gate with an offer of 5 years. I believe it was 128 that Walker Kessler and his camp deemed dissatisfying. And then there were reports of being unhappy, and Kessler then put out an Instagram post disputing the idea that he's unhappy in Utah at all. There have now been multiple reports, and these actually also go back a couple weeks, but they've been heating up over the last 12 hours, that Jalen Duren is legitimately unhappy with this process with the Pistons, and really, for the time being, and these things can shift, but would like a change of scenery. And it seems like the piece of this with Duren is much more of a no, really, I would like to leave, all things being equal, than Walker Kessler, which may be more things being equal. I'd like the contract that I want, but I have no issues staying in Utah. But interesting wrinkle with that, and then we'll continue forward. The Jazz brought back Jusuf Nurkic to a 2-year, $22 million deal, which struck, I know some people, at least on NBA Twitter, is on the high side. But also when you take into account, they've got Jaren Jackson Jr., they've got Lauri Markkanen, they've got Kyle Filipowski, and now Jusuf Nurkic, that is a lot of front court before you start getting into Walker Kessler. So I'm not saying it's definitely something to read into, but it definitely got the wheels turning in my head. Like, it's a lot.
It's a lot of people. I will say this: the Nurkic thing, I didn't react to as strongly in terms of how it would affect Kessler. First of all, they still got plenty of money to be able to do it. Nurkic was really good for them last year. I mean, too good to the point where they had to stop playing him. And so that, it's one of these things where you can make solid argument. I don't cover the Jazz, so I don't know, but like you can make a solid argument that if you are a team that is trying to, you've done all this work, you've got Markkanen, you made the big trade for Jaren Jackson, you've got, an ascending Keontae George and an ascending Ace Bailey. Who'd they just pick up they just picked up Peterson in the draft, didn't they?
Yeah. Yep.
Like they've got all these really good young players with a nice, interesting mix of veterans. You're finally good. So you do things like sign a good backup center, and you do all that. You need more than one. And
it's
so
not even that. It's not even just centers. It's just general.
It's a lot of expensive front court people. There's no question. They got a crowded front court. I mean, my only point is it can be read very easily as a sign that like, if this Kessler thing doesn't go, we want to make sure we have a guy who was a credible starting center for us last year. Kessler, obviously a vastly superior defender to Nurkic, but Nurk is, a really interesting offensive pivot point, kind of serves as a very poor man's Jokic in terms of his capacity, but his capacity to move. They ran a lot of stuff through him last year.
No, I know.
They were in the random quarters they were trying to win, or the ones where they just didn't prevent the losing. And so, I just think there's a possibility here that they're just building out a good team for the first time in so long that nobody recognizes what that looks like in Utah. I agree with you 100% that the Duren thing seems like something's going on there. And I don't think that necessarily means that Detroit won't ultimately match, but it's a bummer because in that one, at least, I don't see what the Lakers could put together other than just way more money than Detroit is comfortable with that would pry them away in a sign and trade. Like the Lakers can't put anything together that would have any value at all to Detroit.
Yeah, and for the time being, I saw multiple reports, whether from Dave McMenamin, ESPN, or Amari Sankofa from the Detroit Free Press, that the Pistons, for the time being, remain committed to keeping Duren around, that they, for the time being, and again, it's always like, as of now, have no plans to trade Jalen Duren. If nothing else, they may want to retain him to then trade him more on their terms, like in 6 months. Remember, 3 of those 6 months, it's the offseason. These people don't even have to be in the same building. So that time's going to fly by pretty quickly. But you're correct that as far as trying to make an appealing trade for Jalen Duren, Sacramento, who the other team that Jalen Duren has been linked to, and there are reports he's going to have a meeting with the Lakers as well as Sacramento, and those are the two, for the time being, teams that he seems most interested in playing for. The Kings would be theoretically swapping out Domantas Sabonis, and while I think there are certain positional fit upgrades, fit downgrades with Sabonis we've talked about before, I think Sabonis is a very talented, very difficult player to put a team around. There are ways in which he, I think, can fit very well with Detroit and fill certain needs they have. But regardless, he is a well above average player and a much better player than anybody the Lakers can trade the Pistons now, as opposed to, say, Utah, who may be looking to win next season, but they're not on quite the same timeline and urgency as Detroit, that was just the number one seed in the East, meaning that if the Lakers did end up working out some deal with Utah, I think there's a little more flexibility in what they can offer the Jazz as opposed to what they can offer the Pistons.
I would agree with that completely. Let's talk a little bit more about this question of like, where, which guy seems more viable as a target for the Lakers. Which guy do you prefer of those two? Because that's an interesting question as well. So we'll cover those things next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel, the biggest stage in world soccer is here. Every match feels like it has the potential for a memorable moment. One goal can completely change the energy of a game, shift momentum, alter the outcome in an instant. It's what makes tournament soccer exciting from the opening whistle to the final kick. And FanDuel is giving fans another reason to stay locked into every match with every goal pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. More goals means more bonus bets. All you have to do is turn on your token. As of this recording, the U.S. is a heavy favorite to reach the next round, paying out at minus 750, which is 127.5 odds. $100 bet pays out at $13.13 just for them to advance. But if you're feeling very confident and looking for a little more juice, the U.S. scoring over 3.5 goals, including extra time, on Wednesday, that pays out at 4.2 to 1. So $100 bet pays out at $420.
Goalapalooza.
Yeah, indeed. And it's also great with every goal scored. Like all of this is synergy, and the tension, I'm telling you, it's going to build up. It's going to be exciting before you even realize it. From the opening tip to the final kick, let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com now to get started.
It's interesting. I just responded to a comment. If you're somebody who's following along on the YouTube channel, of course, we go live on YouTube many times during the week. You can subscribe there to the YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to the audio version on Apple iTunes. Most people get the show through the Apple Podcast Center, but there's also Spotify. There's anywhere you get your podcasts. You can find Locked on Lakers. But somebody asked the question, like, why are the Lakers focusing on a center? It's not like they're going to run the offense inside out. That comes from No Ego on the chat. And the answer is defense, because they are seen to need a defensive anchor, especially if you're going to have Luka and Austin out there. And then there is the additional aspect of it, where it's very clear because he tells you Luka wants a center who can run the floor and finish above the rim. So you get a vertical threat offensively. That's something that's very important to Luka. And even more important, they're looking for some like an anchor to the defense.
And
that to me is why they're focusing so much on center.
And just you want an upgrade, period, over DeAndre Ayton. Like DeAndre Ayton,
who, by the way, did pick up his option officially.
Right,
on Monday,
as both of us suspected would be the case, but he did. And like, it's interesting too, just like you can use an upgrade on both sides of the ball in some respects, but defensively is really the area where the Lakers were most lacking from center play. And you get different things from Jalen Duren versus Walker Kessler. You get much more of a defensive presence, like a pure defensive presence from Kessler. You get a much better offensive presence, a more versatile offensive presence from Jalen Duren. I reached out to Kuka Hill from Locked on Pistons, just chatting back and forth about this situation, asked him to break down Jalen Duren. And obviously, if the Lakers end up with Duren, we will be seeing a lot from Kuka Hill, giving us more in-depth scouting reports. But what he said to me was great offensive big, legit on-ball creation that during the regular season that disappeared during the playoffs. Incredible hands, rarely ever drops passes, incredible lob threat, great touch at the rim, legitimately elite offensive big. Defensively was more active as a rim protector, but struggles to understand angles and pick and roll. Very much needs good defenders around him to look good. For as agile as he is on offense, doesn't show it on defense. A lot of his pro defense numbers is strictly playing with a SAR being a SAR Thompson. I would just say you're not getting Duren because he's helping your defense. He said that the numbers, like the defensive metrics, he thinks make Duren look better than he is. He said, again, almost 90% of that is Asar, although if you look at a lot of Detroit's defensive metrics, the presence of Asar Thompson, I think, shapes how a lot of them look, other than maybe like Cade Cunningham. I say anytime he's played with good defenders, he's been at least passable. If he is not surrounded by good defenders, it's been bad. So that's something to bear in mind. Obviously, with Duren, the flip side, though, is he does give you a lot more optionality than Walker Kessler. I broke down their numbers versus their numbers from Kessler's last full season versus Jalen Duren. His last full season was 2024-25 for Kessler, roughly 11 points, 12 rebounds, 2.5 blocks, 66-71 splits, and per 36, 13 points, 15 rebounds, 3 blocks. Duren last year, his breakout season, 19.5 points, 10.5 rebounds, a little under a block, but he played a couple minutes fewer than Kessler. So his per 36 numbers are a little bit better, 25 points per game, 13 rebounds and a block. Duren is also a much better passer, even if the numbers aren't that much different just in pure assists. Like if you look at assist percentage, things like that, he's just a better passer. It's also interesting too, how much you weigh in a bad postseason that Duren just had versus no postseason experience for Kessler. And frankly, never playing in any high leverage games at all. Mm-hmm. The most amount of games Kessler's teams have ever won was his rookie year. They won 37. And the number has decreased since. To be clear, that is not on Walker Kessler.
No, he played 5 games last year, in part because the Jazz, made.
Well, but even before then,
right? But I'm saying, but like last year, for example, he didn't play, and they were holding him out because they didn't want him to play.
Sure.
So,
but I mean,
and that's been happening.
But it was decreasing. Sure, it was decreasing when he was playing normal amount of games. Again, I'm not putting that on Kessler. It's just a reminder that you're looking at a bad last postseason versus no postseasons at all.
Yeah, I look at it this way. I don't care about Jalen Duren's postseason last year. There are 100 different reasons why guys have good postseasons, bad postseasons, and all that kind of stuff. And it's matchup related. It's spacing. Some guy isn't hitting shots, and then you don't like. Yeah. The thing kind of fell apart. And like Detroit is not a dynamic offensive team. It's why they were interested in Austin Reeves to begin with. And it's why they're interested. That's why Zach LaVine going back there is a viable option as part of the sign and trade. It's why Sabonis actually can work for them because their defense is so good that Detroit is normally you think of your center as like the anchor, the guy who kind of ties the defense together. Detroit's defense is so good, it would actually be sort of the opposite. You would then be able to support having a guy in Sabonis who isn't that good defensively because you have the rest of this infrastructure. Now they traded away Isaiah Stewart. They've done stuff like that. So they might be a little bit diminished in that regard, but clearly they needed a way to figure out how to score more points. And Sabonis is, a pretty elite offensive player still. His numbers were down last year in Sacramento, in part because Sacramento was depressing his numbers. And so in offensively, I think he'd be a huge boost for them. Who you want more is an interesting question to me because on the one hand, I'm intrigued by Duren, both obviously the athleticism. Kessler's a certain kind of athlete. He's actually, for a guy as enormous as he is, that's a certain kind of athlete and a pretty elite one. And his defensive metrics are off the charts. Like since basically the moment he got in the league, his defensive metrics are insane. Duren is, like you say, the lesser defender, but man, the potential and the growth trajectory that he's been on. I'd be happy with either one. I'm kind of maybe they're so defensively short, especially if Smart leaves. I'm sort of inclined to say Kessler, but if you told me they'd end up with Jalen Duren, I'd be happy with that. The question for me is, and you don't have to answer this one now, curious who you'd rather have. The question is the number that they'd have to get to get either one of them. But anyway, which guy would you prefer?
I think Jalen Duren is overall, he's certainly the more proven player than Walker Kessler. And I would say, I think he's definitely more decorated. He's probably the better player and the more, I think, talented player. But I also think Walker Kessler, he addresses more immediate needs, like on this team defensively. With the rebounding is a wash. They're both excellent on the glass. Like both of them will help you that way. Kessler is not as dynamic an offensive player as Duren, but he can help the offense, if not in as many ways. And at the very least, he won't crater it.
4.5 offensive rebounds a game he's basically averaged over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, I mean, both guys are really good on the glass, like on both sides of the glass. I consider it a wash. They're both very good at it. What I think, though, Kessler does, even as the guy that I think, at the very least, like I said, not as proven and definitely not as decorated, he addresses more pressing needs. And I think he raises the Lakers' floor more than Duren, even if you can make an argument that Duren might raise the ceiling higher just because he is that much. I think the gap between their offense might be greater than the gap between the defense. But regardless, I think Kessler addresses more pressing needs than Duren. Again, like you, I'd be happy with either one. I think Duren may not fit as many urgent needs for the team as Kessler, even though, again, I think Duren is probably the better player.
It's hard to see. I mean, I was going to say, and we can get to the AD LeBron news here in a minute. Like, I think the argument could be too that like Duren might be the more complete player, depending on how, if you think he's a passable defensive center, not a defensible center. But I think what you could argue though is Kessler is better at his best thing than Duren is at his best thing. Like I know you said, like, are you, the gap, you were sort of making that comparison. Is the gap between Kessler's offense and defense bigger than the gap between Duren's? I think, there are people out there at the very least who would say that Kessler's best skill, he's better at it. And that would be
certainly possible
than Duren. And so like, there's one other thing about this that I think is really, really important to consider. And we'll do that next, and then we'll get to the LeBron stuff. The last thing I'll say is, like, you talked about the postseason for Duren, and like I said, I don't care. It's like
me neither. He's 22 years old. I'm not
first one. There are tons of players struggle series to series. They have a bad postseason one year. They're great the next. Like I always like to say, Peyton Manning couldn't win a Super Bowl until he could. And certain guys, it takes a second. It's bad luck. It's whatever. The one thing I will say, like when you spend this much money on a center, and like maybe I think with Kessler, it's pretty because you are drafting, you are signing, going after Kessler for his defense. That is the biggest reason. You have to make sure that you are tailoring a roster that allows you to have a defense that can keep Kessler on the floor in critical moments. You have to make sure if he's a drop coverage guy, which I'm fairly sure he is, you don't want to stick Walker Kessler out on the perimeter, have him switching a bunch of people. Like you need to make sure that you have personnel on the rest of your roster that allows you to get 32 minutes a night out of Kessler. And the same thing for Duren. But like, I think that's an easier proposition with Duren because his offense is so much more versatile. So it's something to think about that I'm sure the Lakers are, but the construction of your roster when you're getting these centers, if you can't play them the way that they are best utilized, you're spending $35 million to get 80%, 75% of the return just because you're misusing a player. And so that's just the one other thing I wanted to put out there.
Yeah, that actually leads to something I thought was worth mentioning as well, which is the role either one of them would play. And Jalen Duren, for example, I think expects and understandably / rightly so to have a baseline of offensive involvement, which again, I get it. He averaged almost 20 points a game last year, and he keeps improving along those lines. And he's a really good offensive player. There may be a cap to how much he can be involved in that on a team with Luka and Austin, whereas there's no such thing as a ceiling for how much the Lakers can ask of Walker Kessler or will ask of Walker Kessler. If anything, they'll be asking too much.
Well,
so
if you had to guess, which guy would be more content taking, 10 shots a game, or 8 shots a game, Kessler or Duren? I mean, that's pretty obvious.
It's also too. You're correct. It's Duren, but you can also just as easily argue giving Jalen Duren 10 shots a game.
It's a waste of time. So I think they'd be able to find, especially, those. I mean, I guess some of this depends on LeBron. We'll get to it in a second. Like how many people are there, but over the long term, which is really what we're talking about here. Like I think I think he'd have plenty of opportunities to get 12, 13 shots a game, and Lord knows he's going to have more lob threats and all this stuff. As good as Cade is and all that kind of stuff, nobody's better at making centers look good than Luka. I mean, Kessler, who is like a career 69 or close to 70% shooter, probably shoots 75% playing with Luka.
Yeah, and he did only take 11 and a half shots last year, which is not that far off from what DeAndre Ayton did last year, and that was with Luka, Austin, and LeBron on the team.
But it's a boost. He went from 7 the year before to 11 and a half last year. It's just something to think about. And so let's get to this LeBron thing.
Kessler, lastly, real quick, I think it'll be easier to make a trade for Kessler than Duren if you end up going that route. Again, I think it will be easier for the Lakers in particular to make a deal that satisfies Utah than the Lakers to make a deal that satisfies the Pistons.
I feel like they're picks and pick swaps and things like that and kind of cobble together, maybe we just talked about how much front court company they got. Maybe there's an interest in Rui and Rui will go there. I don't know. Like, I think they can figure out a way to get this done. I agree with you more easily with the Jazz. So we'll see how this goes. The news had started percolating over the weekend that LeBron was potentially interested in going back to Golden State. We've heard versions of this before. It got more interesting at the end of the weekend into Monday with the news that Anthony Davis might be interested in going there as well. If the Wizards don't max him out on an extension, which they shouldn't do that. Never say never with the Wizards, but that doesn't seem like something they're necessarily going to do or anybody is going to do. But that if that doesn't happen, then he would like to perhaps go to play with LeBron in San Francisco with the Warriors. Draymond Green opted out of his player option in order to open up a little more space to be able to do these things. The Lakers and LeBron still haven't been talking, although I think I heard a clip with Ramona Shelburne of ESPN noting that the plan, at least with free agency beginning, is for, somebody to pick up the phone the next day or two.
Yeah, I believe Dave McMenamin was on ESPN radio and said that there's been a little more communication of late. This was later on the day, Monday. I'm pretty sure that's when he said this on ESPN. Then again, though, I was doing ESPN radio, Mason and Ireland on 710 ESPN, and Ramona sat in with us for a little while. And she said, if nothing else, she thinks the Golden State and LeBron talk is legit. And to be clear, that is not a prediction that it's going to happen, but that she doesn't think it's just smoke, or that it's just leverage. It's just LeBron trying to get the Lakers to meet his number or anything like that. Again, not a prediction or report that he's leaving, but that this is more than just posturing. And that would seem to match all the reports out there. And frankly, everything we've seen the last few years of LeBron and the Lakers, that tension. And like I've said, my read has always been, leading up to where we are now, the less communication there is leading up to free agency between the LeBron and the Lakers, at the very least, the more, to me, it signals he's interested in leaving. He's weighing the idea of leaving.
I think too, like I was interested when I heard, a report on Monday that LeBron, money isn't the thing that matters to LeBron. That's not what he's concerned about. Like, and that's a rumor that cuts both ways. It's both damage control, so to speak, reputation management. Like, oh, he's not a mercenary. He's not just gonna stay with the Lakers for money. You need to show him the best situation. You need to show him respect and all these other things. It's also, you could say, an argument that the Lakers don't have to go nuts if they can put a good team. Like, there's just a ton of levels to this. And I think what is, I'll be watching as closely as anybody. I mean, I think it's fascinating, the idea that you could get AD and LeBron reunited in another city after winning a title in LA. But the timing of all this stuff to me is really important, because the Lakers, if they want to get into the Kessler and Duren sweepstakes, for example, they're going to have to sit down and have meetings with these guys who are going to start talking on Tuesday. Maybe it goes into Wednesday. Let's say everything goes really well. You meet with Kessler on Tuesday, an offer sheet comes in on Wednesday. He wants to sign it. He does. You're still tied up until Thursday, basically, or Friday. And in that time, the Lakers, I guess once Kessler signs an offer sheet, they might have an idea of what they've got available to Rui. They might know what they want to give Marcus Smart or something like that. But I think the market for those guys could go pretty quick. I saw, again, the reports of Smart, who did opt out, going to Houston, going to all these other places. Like, they could lose players that are important to them while some of these things happen. So they have to be very aware and very careful, I think.
Well, I think that's also why, if possible, the Lakers it would behoove them, if possible, to try to work out a trade. If it really looks like it's moving in this direction, to work out a trade for Kessler or for Duren, as opposed to going the offer sheet route, because then there's just more clarity faster once this stuff is agreed upon. There's increasing chatter that Marcus Smart really is going to be courted hard by the Rockets, if not by other teams as well. By every indication, he really liked his time with the Lakers, and I know they liked him. But at the same time, this is Marcus Smart's last opportunity to get, he's not going to get big money by NBA standards, but it's likely his last opportunity to get a contract of any length with, 8 digits AAV, just because of his age and his injury history.
Or even high sevens, but you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, I just, all of this stuff puts pressure on the Lakers, like that pushes the price up on Smart, which puts the Lakers in an uncomfortable position. The Pistons stuff and the courting of Austin Reeves already pushed the price on Austin Reeves higher than the Lakers certainly were hoping to pay. May have also kind of pissed off Jalen Duren in the process. It's like, really, you're going to give that guy max, and you're not me, your own guy, right? Exactly. Could have had something to do with it. Absolutely. It's not impossible. They could do some good work, but they're going to have to be really on the stick. I mean, like you said on Monday's show, already losing track of the days, the restricted free agency thing could take a minute to sort itself out. But the rest of the league, there are only so many teams that are going to be kind of waiting on Walker Kessler and Duren, as opposed to you have these situations where you have disgruntled stars, for example, who might go from one place to the next, that can really hold up the league. The Giannis trade, if it hadn't happened yet, could legitimately hold up the free agency process. Before we go, what'd you think of the Ja deal?
That is, first of all, out of left field, not in the sense that Memphis was looking to move Ja. That's been an open secret for like 2 years. but Portland did not seem to be on the board.
No, they're like, you mentioned all the front court guys that the Jazz have. That's Portland with their backcourt.
Yeah, they got a lot of guards over there. I suspect that they're not done making moves because, frankly, they need to.
Drew Holiday was already. I already saw a report that Holiday could be dangled out there. I would kick the tires on that if I was the Lakers.
I'd have to look at their books to see how possible that actually.
Right. I mean, if it was something you could do and kind of, we'll help you. Yeah.
Sure. Just Drew makes. I love Drew Holiday. He makes a decent chunk. He does
make
a lot.
I think he makes more money than I was thinking. You're right.
Right. So it could be difficult without some machinations. Like he's going to be making almost 35 next year.
Oh, forget it. Yeah. Forget it.
But they got a lot of guards. You know, they had been heavily rumored in the Jalen Brown thing, which seems like he might get moved somewhere because he just seems unhappy with the discourse about him in general. And frankly, I don't blame him. The Jalen Brown discourse has become ridiculous. What I will say though about Ja and Portland, it's not an obvious fit, not even just because of the amount of guards they have on this roster, but just they lack spacing. Ja does not help along those lines. There's the concerns that are always there with Ja because of Wave's arms around, plus the injuries. That being said, though, if they get even a B+ version of peak Ja who stays on the court, they'll be really dynamic. Like Ja, when he is right physically and mentally, that dude can be a problem. Yeah. And I imagine he's looking to show the rest of the league and fans and whatever, they were the problem, not me. Whether that's accurate
and
or
if
not.
He wants that, the part that I forgot about, I mean, I knew Ja was relatively young. He's 26.
I know.
And so like if he plays well, Portland's got him for 2 years. And they're not going to just extend him right away. Like, so
not with that owner.
If he plays well, like he's got another, and it can stay healthy. He's got another, many tens of $1 million per year that he can get, so that is, it's something that the fact that he didn't have to give up anything of value. I mean, Jeremy Grant is still a decent player, but makes
they've been shopping him for years.
They've been trying to get rid of him for a couple of years, and Chris Murray is just filler. And so to get Ja without giving up significant pieces, without having to give up draft picks, when you still have Scoot, all these guys become, Shaden Sharp is a good
Denny
player.
Avdia.
Denny Avdia. These are all people that could get interest around the league. If they want to make some more moves and bounce out. But meanwhile, in the front court, you've got Klingon, you've got Camera, and all these other people. Like that's an interesting team. The Western Conference just keeps adding people. They added LaMelo Ball. Now they've added. I mean, that Ja was still here, but like he might as well not have been because he wasn't on a relevant team. It doesn't get any easier, does it?
And the Warriors might be forming the Expendables with Steph Curry playing the role of Sly Stallone, and I guess LeBron and Draymond fighting over who gets to be Statham.
Which on the 4 nights a year, but all 4 of those guys are available, to be a very dynamic team. I'd watch that. I just, it's not going to be. They're not going to be on the floor together very often, but just
It's also like if, say, they go the full Monty with this, like they manage to get both LeBron and Anthony Davis. I'm wondering, like, does Draymond come off the bench at this point? Like, what are they? Because, like, otherwise you're looking at AD either at center or being fooled into thinking he's not playing center.
AD's the center, I think, and Draymond is sort of your power forward. LeBron's kind of playing smart. They just have a bunch of dudes.
I'm just saying it's kind of a weird lineup.
It's an extraordinarily weird lineup. And
Porzingis, who they're keeping,
you need a lot of guys coming in with depth, and Podziemski, and but remember too, like Moody is going to be out for a while. I think, and so I don't know exactly what this looks like. I would do it if I was Golden State because, like, why not? Like,
I would do it if I were the Wizards. If you're the Wizards,
unless you're going to tear it down. If I'm the Wizards, I would do it. But like, unless you're going to tear it down, might as well. I mean, make Steph's last year or two kind of interesting. So we'll see.
Sky Falcon 5 says add Play and Kevin Love to the mix. Seriously, why not? Why not?
It's insane. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is ready to go. Hang out with over 38,000 subscribers. Do make sure you are subscribing to the audio version of this podcast as well. Of course, again, 3 p.m. is on the Pacific time is when free agency begins. We, of course, will be monitoring the situation closely. If and when the Lakers sign Timofey Mozgov, we will be here with an update. So anything that happens, we will respond to it and make sure you're sticking close to the channel. We'll see everyone next time. If